The darkness between galaxies stirs with an all-consuming hunger. From beyond the stars comes a horror with but one purpose: to feed. They are the Tyranids, a ravenous swarm of bioengineered monsters driven by a single voracious will. No treaties can be struck with them, no mercy expected. In the Tyranids' alien psyche, there are only two roles in the universe: the devourer and the prey. To face them is to fight for survival itself, for they cannot be reasoned with or deterred. They exist only to consume. Worse still, every Hive fleet so far encountered is but a vanguard tendril of an invasion force still on its way. Against this foe, the galaxy stands on the brink of annihilation, its defenders trembling as the Great Devourer's shadow looms ever closer. In whispers and terrified reports, the Tyranids are spoken of as an extragalactic scourge. Their origin lies outside our galaxy, in the cold void between the stars. Countless millennia ago, their swarms drifted through intergalactic space, devouring worlds in galaxies unknown. Some Imperial savants believe the Tyranids were drawn here by the psychic beacon of the Emperor's Astronomicon, or perhaps by an ancient signal during the Horus Heresy, the overloaded Pharos device on Sotha that shone like a lantern in the void. However, when they first sensed our galaxy's life, the Tyranids came speeding inward. The Imperium eventually gave this abomination a name to salve its own fear: Tyranids, after the remote planet of Tyran where they were first encountered. But in truth, if the hive mind is even aware of us, it knows us only as food and fuel for its endless advance. It is whispered in dark corners that these aliens may have already consumed 1,000 other galaxies, extinguishing millions of intelligent species before turning their gaze upon our own. Whether or not this terrifying tally is true, one fact is certain: the Tyranid race is on a genocidal rampage that now threatens every living being in the Milky Way galaxy. The first official contact with the Tyranids came late in the 41st millennium, and it was nothing short of catastrophic. In 741 M41, on the eastern fringe of Imperial space, Hive Fleet Behemoth burst from the void and fell upon the unsuspecting planet Tyran. By the time fragmentary astropathic warnings reached the wider Imperium, the Xenos fleet had annihilated Tyran, stripping all life from its surface. The horrified Magos biologist who studied the aftermath on Tyran perished along with his team, but not before relaying enough data for the High Lords to recognize a dire new threat. In response, Adeptus Astartes forces and battle fleet elements were stationed along the eastern fringe. Yet these precautions were merely scattered candles before an onrushing night. Within a few short years, Hive Fleet Behemoth drove deeper, engulfing dozens of worlds. Entire planetary populations vanished into the devouring swarm, leaving only lifeless husks in the Tyranids' wake. On every infested planet, the pattern was the same. Skies turned sickly red with drifting spores, bioships eclipsed the sun, and chitinous horrors descended in numberless waves to consume every living thing. Each such world was left a barren rock, drained of all biomass, stripped even of atmosphere and water, a gutted carcass adrift in space. As Hive Fleet Behemoth carved a path of destruction across the eastern fringe, the Imperial forces scrambled to respond. Chapter Master Marneus Calgar of the Ultramarines, whose realm of Ultramar lay in the Xenos path, swore that Behemoth would be halted at Macraga, the Ultramarines' homeworld. Inquisitor Cryptman of the Ordo Xenos, one of the first to study the Tyranid threat, brought vital intelligence that an immeasurable alien swarm was on approach. Thus forewarned, the Ultramarines marshaled a colossal defense at Macragge. Every fortress was manned, every orbital platform readied. Warships gathered in great fleets above the planet. Ultramarines, strike cruisers, Imperial Navy vessels, even press-ganged merchant ships hastily armed for battle. On the ground, Calgar divided his forces, stationing elite companies and regiments of auxilia in Macraga's polar fortresses, while he led a mobile force to engage the Tyranids in the field. The stage was set for an apocalyptic confrontation. The First Tyrannic War was about to reach its bloody climax on Macraga when Hive Fleet Behemoth arrived in 745 M41. It struck with unprecedented fury. A halo of bioships and mycetic spores rained upon Macraga without pause. The void battle in orbit raged for days. Waves of chittering Tyranid biovessels threw themselves against Macraga's fleet defenses. Many alien craft were obliterated in high orbit, but still more broke through, disgorging spores and organisms into Macraga's skies. On the surface, battle was joined across frozen continents. Ultramarines in ceramite and adamantium stood against a sea of living nightmares. At Cold Steel Ridge, Calgar and the Second Company fought a heroic rearguard using super-heavy tanks and disciplined bolter fire to stem the onrushing swarms. Yet even the valor of the Adeptus Astartes could only delay the inevitable. Bleeding and battered, Calgar was grievously wounded in desperate close combat with a Hive tyrant. The Tyranid monstrosity crushed the chapter master's armor and nearly slew him, leaving Calgar on the brink of death. Still, the Ultramarines fought on, buying time with their lives. The culmination of the battle for Macragi came at the planet's northern polar fortress. There, Captain Saul Invictus and the Ultramarines' First Company, the chapter's finest veterans in tactical dreadnought armor, made their last stand. Genestealers, carnifexes, and innumerable lesser beasts swarmed the fortress corridors in endless waves. The Terminators held the line until ammunition and bodies were spent. When relief forces finally broke through, they found a harrowing scene. The Ultramarines' entire First Company lay dead, encircled where they fell, each veteran surrounded by heaps of Tyranid corpses. The Ultramarines had paid in blood to halt the Hive Fleet's advance. In space, the remnants of Behemoth's bioships were finally outmaneuvered and blasted apart by Imperial Navy reinforcements. On the ground, the last bio-horrors were hunted down in the following weeks. Thus, Hive Fleet Behemoth was defeated. The Imperium had won its first victory against the Tyranids, but at terrible cost. Macraga itself was saved, yet left infested with Xenos creatures that took years to fully purge. The Ultramarines chapter was shattered, fully half its fighting strength gone. It would be 100 years before they could rebuild their losses, and the scars of Macraga, physical and spiritual, never truly healed. In honor of the fallen, Chaplain Cassius formed the Tyrannic War Veterans, a cadre of survivors devoted to mastering Tyranid-killing tactics. Though Behemoth had been ended, the shadow of the Tyranids still hung over Ultramar, and as the Imperium would soon learn, Behemoth was only the first of many such horrors to come. Barely 2.5 centuries later, the Second Tyrannic War erupted. In 992 M41, a new Hive fleet named Kraken struck the galaxy. Unlike Behemoth's headlong assault, Kraken attacked with cunning and multiplicity. Its tendrils spread like a coiled serpent, unwrapping, striking many systems at once. Imperial forces across the eastern fringe were suddenly beset by multiple Tyranid incursions. One tendril of Kraken descended upon the beleaguered jungle world of Ishar IV, sparking a massive conflict with Imperial Guard and Space Marine forces. Another tendril plunged into the craft world domains of the Eldar. In late M41, craft world Iyanden, once a pinnacle of Eldari power, found itself directly in Kraken's path. The Eldar's first warning was the psychic scream of the Tyranids' approach. The shadow in the warp smothered Iyanden's seers, and a swarm of bioships moved in too vast to evade. In a matter of days, Hive Fleet Kraken's organisms boarded the craft world. What followed was a battle of legend and tragedy. Wraithguard constructs and aspect warriors clashed with innumerable Tyranid creatures in Iyanden's infinity circuits and domed gardens. Eldar warlocks dueled the psychic might of zoanthropes, while towering bio-titans rampaged through Eondan's corridors, met in battle by the Eldar's own phantom titans. Despite Eldar valor, the Tyranids' relentless assault pushed Eondan to the brink of extinction. With casualties mounting and the craft world overrun, Eondan's cause seemed lost, until salvation arrived from an unexpected quarter. The exiled Prince Iriel, answering his home's call, returned at the darkest hour with his corsair fleet. Iriel's void ships tore into the Tyranid swarm in space, clearing a path and cutting off the endless reinforcements to the craft world's surface. On Eondan's bloodied soil, the final turning point came when Iriel himself spearheaded a counterattack. Armed with the legendary Spear of Twilight, Iriel slew the dominant Tyranid Hive Tyrant in single combat. Deprived of synaptic coordination, the remaining Tyranid organisms on Eondan fell into disarray and were hunted down. Eondan was saved, but its population was devastated. Billions of Eldar lives lost, spirits entombed in the craft world's infinity circuit. Eldar legend forever remembers that dreadful conflict as the doom of Eondan, a Pyrrhic victory that left Eondan a haunted shell of its former glory. Elsewhere, Hive Fleet Kraken's other tendrils were fought to a standstill by the Imperium. On Ichar 4, the Ultramarines, reeling still from the First Tyrannic War, battled alongside other chapters and Imperial Guard to defeat Kraken's invasion in a grueling campaign. Kraken did not fall in one titanic engagement as Behemoth had, but rather splintered under sustained pressure. Its largest bioships were blasted apart, its surviving fragments scattered into the darkness. Yet even in defeat, Kraken spawned countless splinter fleets, smaller offshoots of the main hive that survived and lurked at the galaxy's edge, ready to rise again. The lesson was stark. The Tyranid menace was evolving and could not be stamped out easily. Indeed, barely 5 years passed after Kraken's assault before the next major incursion began. In 997 M41, Inquisitor Cryptman, ever vigilant against Xenos threats, identified the approach of Hive Fleet Leviathan, the largest Tyranid swarm yet encountered. Hive Fleet Leviathan attacked on a galactic scale unprecedented in Imperial records. Instead of coming from the eastern fringe like its predecessors, Leviathan emerged from the void below the galactic plane, then struck upward into the soft underbelly of the Imperium. Its tendrils spread in a two-pronged invasion, cutting into both the galactic southwest and southeast. This cunning approach outflanked many of the Imperial defenses arranged facing the eastern fringe. Leviathan's biomass was staggering. Tendrils of the fleet overran entire sectors in short order. No longer were Space Marines and sector fleets facing a single localized Hive fleet. Now, the Tyranid onslaught threatened multiple segmentums at once. Whole subsectors went dark under the shadow in the warp as Leviathan devoured world after world. On beleaguered planets, defenders witnessed horrifying new bioforms adapted to counter every strategy. Camouflaged lictors sowing terror behind the front lines, winged harridans and gargoyles blotting out the sun, living artillery organisms bombarding fortifications from afar. Leviathan seemed to possess endless diversity and ceaseless appetite. The more the Imperium resisted, the more the hive mind spawned lethal new adaptations to overcome that resistance. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Inquisitor Cryptman, now infamous for his ruthless strategies, enacted an extraordinary plan to slow Leviathan's advance. He knew the orc empires of the galaxy thrive on warfare, and that orcs and Tyranids locked in combat might annihilate one another. Cryptman ordered the exterminatus of dozens of Imperial worlds to deny Leviathan fresh biomass, burning entire planets to ash as a sacrificing shield. He then corralled a tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan toward the massive orc empire of Octarius. In a grim gambit, Cryptman's agents seeded live Genestealers, captured at great cost by Deathwatch kill teams, onto space hulks aimed at Octarius, ensuring the Tyranids and orcs would meet. The result was the Octarius War, a titanic collision between Xenos. Leviathan swarms plunged into orc-held space, and the greenskins, rather than crumbling, responded with glee and fury. In the Octarius sector, entire systems became charnel houses where millions of orcs battled billions of Tyranid organisms. The conflict escalated far beyond Cryptman's intentions. Neither foe could quickly best the other. The orcs only grew more excited and drew in more of their warbands from afar, while the Tyranids endlessly adapted to the orc war machine, evolving deadlier bioforms to counter each new strategy. The war became a horrific feedback loop of carnage. Imperial observers noted that the Tyranids in Octarius began spawning bigger, more brutish creatures to match the notoriously tough orc physiology, while simultaneously developing new weapons like hypertoxic spores to overcome the orcs' fungal resilience. Likewise, orc society reached new heights of belligerence, with ever larger and more violent hordes coalescing to face Dawbug War. The Octarius War achieved Cryptman's aim of diverting Leviathan for a time, but at the cost of creating an ever-strengthening meat grinder that could later spill out into Imperial space with renewed fury. Indeed, reports indicate that by late M41, elements of Leviathan and the orcs had begun to push past Octarius's borders, threatening adjacent sectors. Cryptman's peers in the Inquisition censured him for this uncontrollable gambit. Some called it a success in buying precious time. Others deemed it a grave folly that only compounded the danger. Regardless, the Imperium soon faced Leviathan's onslaught on other fronts, even as Octarius burned. While part of Leviathan was mired fighting orcs, another tendril set its sights on a jewel of the Imperium, Baal, homeworld of the Blood Angels Space Marine chapter. In 999 M41, the tyrannic swarm descended upon the Baal system in what would be called the Devastation of Baal. Commander Dante of the Blood Angels marshaled the chapter, and no fewer than 30,000 space
The skies of Baal Prime were choked with Leviathan's living drop pods, and a battle of legend erupted on the ashen plains beneath the red moon. For weeks, the Blood Angels and their allies waged an all-out war against the immeasurable swarm. Despite their heroic defense, even the Angels of Death faltered as Leviathan's numberless creatures pushed them to the brink. In the climactic hours of that apocalyptic battle, fate took a strange turn. The galaxy itself convulsed. The Great Rift, birth of a galaxy-spanning warp storm, tore reality apart as the chaos gods stirred. Demonic armies spewed forth onto Baal, crashing into the exhausted Tyranids. Bloodthirsty Cornate demons clashed with Tyranid bio-titans in a grotesque collision of monstrosities. In a bitter twist, the servants of chaos did what the Imperium alone could not. They butchered the Tyranids in orgiastic fury, forcing the Hive Fleet to recoil. By the time the indomitous crusade forces of Robuta Gilliman arrived at Baal, much of Hive Fleet Leviathan lay in ruins, caught between the hammer of the Blood Angels and the anvil of demonic wrath. Leviathan's main thrust was broken at Baal, though at a terrible price. Baal itself was left a ruined, poisonous wasteland of ichor and blood, its once radiant sands now blackened. The Blood Angels survived narrowly to see a new dawn with Primaris reinforcements, but Leviathan was not completely destroyed. Many tendrils slipped away from Baal's disaster, writhing back into the void to regroup. Even with Leviathan seemingly defeated, the Imperium's respite was short-lived. In truth, the Tyranid threat was evolving yet again. The catastrophic warp disturbances of the Great Rift scattered some Tyranid swarms, but others adapted to the new galaxy torn by warp storms. A new major fleet, designated Hive Fleet Kronos, emerged in the wake of the rift's opening, notable for its peculiar behavior. Kronos actively sought out regions of high warp activity, as if drawn to combat the demonic taint flooding real space. Imperial xenobiologists postulate that the hive mind, finding chaos-corrupted worlds inedible and the warp an anathema, adapted Chronos to contain or neutralize demonic threats, ensuring no source of biomass is beyond reach. Chronos organisms display an uncanny resistance to warp energies and an abundance of psychic bioforms, effectively battling demons and shutting down warp rifts by their mere presence. This development confirmed a frightening truth. The Tyranids will adapt to any challenge, even the power of chaos itself. Beyond the great Hive Fleets Behemoth, Kraken, Leviathan, and Chronos, many lesser yet still deadly, Tyranid incursions have struck across the galaxy. Hive Fleet Gorgon, for instance, invaded the Tau Empire around 899 M41. Though comparatively small, Gorgon was infamous for its hyper-adaptive biology. On the battlefield, Gorgon's swarms would rapidly mutate to counter Tau defenses, new toxins and resistances emerging within hours. The Tau noted Gorgon manifesting more bioform varieties than any Tyranid fleet previously seen, its organisms evolving new traits literally in the midst of battle. In one engagement, when Tau forces supported by Kroot mercenaries started repelling the initial waves of Hormagaunts, Gorgon simply spawned fast-adapting Gaunt strains that were quicker and more resistant to the Kroot's tactics, overwhelming them in a subsequent assault. Only the combined firepower of the Tau, including the legendary Commander Farsight and his enclaves, and Imperial intervention managed to exterminate Hive Fleet Gorgon by 903 M41, and even then, later reports hinted that fragments of Gorgon survived, lurking in far-flung systems. Hive Fleet Jormungandr, by contrast, was known for its stealthy approach. Its organisms prefer to burrow and strike from underground like the great world serpent of myth. Jormungandr tendrils often arrived in system with minimal warning, hiding in the cold depths of space and sending infiltrators that tunnel under defenses before the main assault. Meanwhile, Hive Fleet Hydra earned its name through resilience. It has a pattern of following in the wake of other Hive Fleets' invasions, reabsorbing leftover biomass and even cannibalizing lesser Tyranid creatures, then striking anew with increased strength. There are even rumors of a fleet called Hive Fleet Ouroboros, sighted as early as M36, an ancient Hive Fleet that attacked the galaxy near the Eye of Terror, long before the Imperium understood what it faced. Though details of Ouroboros are scarce and shrouded in myth, some suspect it seeded remote death worlds with Tyranid organisms centuries ago, like a farmer sowing fields to harvest later. Indeed, later Imperial re-examination of records suggest Tyranid creatures might have been present in our galaxy far earlier than officially recognized. For example, the feral Catachan Devil and the ice-dwelling Fenrisian Kraken, deadly native predators on Imperial worlds, are speculated to be descendants of ancient Tyranid bioforms left behind from invasions eons past. These unsettling findings imply the hive mind may have been probing our galaxy long before humanity ever realized, leaving sleeper organisms on distant worlds awaiting reactivation. In every case, big or small, the pattern remains the same. The Tyranids descend like a plague of locusts, and civilizations crumble in their path. No race has been spared contact with the Great Devourer. The Tau Empire, young and innovative, was shaken to its core by the Hive Fleet Gorgon invasion. Entire sept colonies were consumed, and the Tau's faith in the greater good was tested by the sheer animal fury of the Tyranids. The Ethereals were forced to sanction scorched earth tactics and last-ditch alliances, even accepting help from fringe elements like Farsight to halt the swarms. The Eldar, ancient and prescient, find the Tyranids an affront to all their fading glory, a horror beyond the doom they foresaw. Craftworld Eondan's near destruction by Kraken remains a cautionary tale for all Eldar. Other craft worlds have since faced splinters of Hive Fleets, and even the piratical Drukhari fear Tyranids, for there is no pleasure or sport to be had against an enemy that only hungers. The Orcs, for their part, perhaps enjoy the contest most. In the Tyranids they see the ultimate fight, Orc warlords like the mighty Gazkul Thraka have deliberately steered their wogs toward Tyranid incursions, eager to test themselves against the biggest monsters the galaxy can provide. Yet even orcs intuitively understand that if the Tyranids win, nothing will remain to fight another day. Some orc empires have been entirely obliterated by hive fleets that gorged on the abundant biomass of greenskin-infested worlds. In Octarius, the orcs and Tyranids became locked in an apocalyptic war of attrition with no clear victor, a war that still rages, burning system after system to cinders and bone. The Necrons, ancient machine-like dynasties, initially viewed the Tyranids with aloof indifference. After all, the soulless Necrons have no biomass to tempt the Great Devourer. But that indifference turned to stark resolve when Zarek, the silent king of the Necrons, encountered the Tyranids in the intergalactic void during his long exile. He realized that if the Tyranids consumed all organic life, the Necrons' grand plan to restore their biotransferred souls to living bodies would be forever doomed. Thus the Silent King returned to the galaxy, intent on uniting his people to stop the Tyranid menace. In one notable incident on the Tau world of Kamais, a Necron tomb complex awoke in response to a Tyranid invasion. An unexpected Necron fleet burst from beneath the moon's crust and obliterated the Tyranid bioships in orbit. When the grateful Tau attempted to greet these Necrons as saviors, the Necrons wordlessly cut them down as well, for to the Necrons both Tyranid and Tau are merely obstacles to their own designs. This chilling episode underscored that while other species might momentarily share a goal of fighting the Tyranids, true alliances are futile. Finally, even the denizens of chaos have collided with the Great Devourer. Demons and Tyranids are in some ways polar opposites, one born of the warp's emotion-given flesh, the other utterly devoid of spiritual presence. When they meet, their battles are said to be among the bloodiest imaginable. Demons cannot scare or tempt the Tyranids, and Tyranids gain no nourishment from demonic flesh, so there is only pure slaughter on some doomed worlds. Bloodletters and Hormagaunts have torn each other apart in orgies of violence, or Tsientian horrors have expended their eldritch flames trying to unnerve creatures that literally have no fear. The Tyranids' shadow in the warp even keeps the demons from easily maintaining their foothold in reality. Thus, ironically, Tyranid invasions can temporarily stem demonic incursions, but at the cost of the world being devoured by the Hive Fleet instead. In the end, no faction can truly claim victory over the Tyranids. At best, they achieve a Pyrrhic reprieve, a Hive Fleet stalled, a splinter swatted, but never the end of the horror. To understand why the Tyranids are so intractable, one must appreciate their biology and mindset, if such a term even applies to a horror so alien. The Tyranid race is not a collection of individuals, but one vast, interconnected superorganism. Every Tyranid creature, from the smallest insect-like ripper to the towering hive tyrant, is mentally linked to the communal hive mind. This Gestalt consciousness coordinates the swarm's every move. It thinks galactically, using its countless extensions, the Tyranid creatures, as limbs and tools. Within the Tyranid swarms are certain dominant bioforms known as synapse creatures, like hive tyrants, Tyranid warriors, and zoanthropes that act as relay nodes for the hive mind's will. They broadcast psychic imperatives that guide the lesser beasts. As long as synapse creatures are present, Tyranid swarms move with chilling purpose and discipline, operating as a unified entity. However, if synaptic control is disrupted, say, a dominant hive tyrant is slain, the nearby lesser organisms revert to mindless animal instincts, thrashing and acting on base predator urges until synapse control is reasserted. This is why Tyranid war strategies often center on decapitation strikes. Armies desperately try to kill the synapse leaders in hopes of throwing the swarm into disarray. Yet the hive mind is cunning. It protects its synapse nodes with layered waves of defenders, and has even been known to spawn especially potent leaders, like the nearly unkillable Swarm Lord, to counter the heroes that threaten its plans. Indeed, certain Tyranid overlords reappear in war after war, as the hive mind evolves them anew from the biomass of their predecessors, each time learning from past failures. Physically, Tyranid creatures are nightmarish amalgams of insect, reptile, and cephalopod, with an endless variety of forms adapted to every niche of warfare. Six-limbed and armored in chitin, most Tyranids scuttle or stalk on four legs while wielding two clawed arms or weapon limbs. Redundant organs, hyper-dense musculature, and rapid healing factor make them extremely hard to kill. Their blood is acidic and can carry microscopic organisms to infect those who wound them. Their weaponry is entirely biological. Living guns and symbiotic blades grown as extensions of their bodies. A Tyranid may carry a flesh borer, a beetle hive that spits flesh-eating grubs, or a venom cannon, a snake-like organism that launches toxic shards. All are living creatures fused to their wielder. Even what humans would call ammunition is alive. Bony spines, corrosive maggots, plasma spore blobs, each bred within the Tyranid's flesh and expelled in combat. This organic technology is so advanced that Imperial xenologists marvel at it. The Tyranids achieve effects with gene-forged life forms that the Adeptus Mechanicus struggles to emulate with metal and machine. For instance, some Tyranid biocannons can pierce tank armor by firing a high-velocity crystal grown inside a creature's gullet, while their phage organisms can dissolve infantry in acids secreted on contact. Tyranid bodies also exhibit countless small adaptive tricks, spore chimneys on larger beasts, vent excess heat and shroud battlefields in toxic mist. Feeder tendrils on certain strains can taste the air for prey or burrow into victims to absorb genetic material. Even a seemingly dead Tyranid might harbor dormant organ clusters ready to reactivate if the hive mind wills it. In short, the Tyranid anatomy is a weaponized engine of evolution. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Tyranid biology is its malign intelligence directed toward evolution and adaptation. The hive mind continuously breeds new species and strains to counter whatever resistance it meets. If a prey world fields strong aerial defenses, the next wave of Tyranids will include thicker-shelled airborne gargoyles or spore mines that detonate like chaff to confuse targeting. When confronted with unusual enemy tactics or weapons, the Tyranids have been seen to alter their own genetic makeup in weeks or even days, overcoming obstacles with shocking speed. During Hive Fleet Gorgon's war against the Tau, Imperial observers documented that Tyranid bioweapons altered their biochemical venom composition on the fly. As Tyranid creatures tasted Tau blood and tissue, their bodies synthesized ever more lethal toxins specifically tailored to Tau biology. A poison that was harmless in the battle's first hours became deadly by its end, once the collective hive mind analyzed Tau physiology and transmitted adaptive instructions through the synapse network. In another case, during the defense of a hive world, the invading Tyranids initially fell prey to the virus bombs deployed by the Imperial defenders, but in mere days, the next waves of Tyranids showed immunity to the virus, their bodies having purged or metabolized the pathogen. This bioadaptability means conventional tactics rarely work for long. By the time a war against the Tyranids enters its later stages, the Xenos will have often neutralized whatever weapon or stratagem was most effective at the outset. It is evolution at a speed and scale that makes a mockery of natural selection. Directed by the hive mind's genius, the swarms undergo deliberate metamorphosis. Every shred of genetic material consumed from prey is studied, broken down, and repurposed to improve the Tyranid species. In effect, the more you fight Tyranids, the more dangerous they become. How then does one stop an apex predator that only grows stronger? The Imperium has tried every measure imaginable, and still the Tyranid threat looms larger each decade. Standard battle doctrine against Tyranids emphasizes concentration of firepower to cut down the swarms before they can close, and decapitation strikes against synapse creatures. Elite kill teams like the Death Watch specialize in these tactics, using specialized ammunition such as hyperfragmentation rounds to shred chitin or pyrophoric warheads to immolate Tyranid flesh in hopes of slaying key bioforms. Yet even the Death Watch's finely honed expertise is often akin to bailing water out of a sinking ship. In the face of a full Hive fleet, more extreme measures are authorized. The Inquisition and High Lords have not hesitated to declare exterminatus on worlds in the path of a Hive fleet. Better to deny the Tyranids fresh biomass, even if it means sacrificing billions of Imperial citizens. Such ruthless logic guided Cryptman's campaign, where he created a cordon of dead worlds by virus-bombing human planets on Leviathan's route. This tactic starves and slows the Tyranids, but it is hellish calculus. It trades lives for time and sometimes only enrages the hive mind to push harder elsewhere. The Adeptus Mechanicus, for its part, has studied Tyranid specimens obsessively, seeking any biological weakness. Experiments on captive bioforms, when they can be kept alive in stasis, have yielded scant comfort. The Magos biologists often conclude that only overwhelming force can stop a Hive fleet once it has arrived. Thus the Imperium musters its might. Space Marine chapters form tyrannic war veteran cadres. Imperial Guard regiments drill in Xenos killing. Fleets prepare incendiary bombardments. Titan legions and night households are deployed to bring down the largest bio-titans in pitched battles. Every resource is brought to bear, because nothing less than total commitment will suffice. A fact hammered home by a chilling assessment delivered to Imperial commanders in the wake of Leviathan. The Strategic Collective reported that Behemoth, Kraken, and Leviathan were likely mere talons of the greater beast, a prelude to a far larger main Tyranid invasion force yet to hit the galaxy. They predicted that within a century the full strength of the Tyranids could arrive, a swarm so vast that only a five-fold increase in Imperial military power could hope to hold it at bay. This would require mass recruitment on a hitherto unthinkable scale and the mobilization of every available asset, from Segmentum Solar to Tempestus, just to slow the coming onslaught. In essence, the Imperium was warned. Even our Pyrrhic victories against the Tyranids may only delay an inevitable doom. It is not only in the material realm that the Tyranids erode their foes' hopes. They also assail the mind and spirit. As a Hive fleet approaches a target world, one of the first signs is a pervasive psychic disturbance known as the shadow in the warp. This phenomenon is the hive mind's immense psychic presence smothering the local warp space, an effect like a psychic blackout that extends for light years around the fleet. Under the shadow in the warp, astropaths and sorcerers find their visions overwhelmed by a cacophony of alien telepathic noise. Astropathic messages cannot escape, warp travel becomes unreliable, and those attuned to the warp suffer debilitating terror. Imperial reports describe astropaths bleeding from their eyes and screaming in madness, unable to endure the sibilant chittering that fills their minds when the Tyranids draw near. Navigators guiding ships through warp space become blinded, their warp sight eclipsed by the shadow's psychic static. To the average person, the shadow manifests as an intangible dread, nightmares, and an instinctual feeling of doom that precedes the physical arrival of the swarm. On besieged worlds, leaders find themselves cut off and isolated as astropathic communication fails, truly alone in the dark with the Great Devourer. This strategic isolation is intentional. The hive mind uses the shadow to cripple coordination and sow fear even before its organisms make planetfall. Moreover, the shadow in the warp has the side effect of repelling or suppressing warp entities. Demons find it difficult to manifest in the presence of a hive fleet, as the hive mind's broadcast drowns out the psychic echoes that chaos thrives upon. Thus, in a grim paradox, one horror can keep another at bay, but none can offer solace to humanity. When the hive fleet arrives, the warp falls silent, hope of outside help evaporates, and the defenders realize that no reinforcement is coming through that suffocating darkness. The shadow in the warp is the storm front of the Tyranid invasion. By the time you feel its oppressive weight in your bones, the devouring swarm is already at your doorstep. Once the Tyranids reach a prey world, the true nightmare begins. Imperial xenobiologists have categorized the Tyranid invasion into stages, a process often called tyrannoforming, as the Tyranids reshape a biosphere to facilitate consumption. First comes infiltration and subversion. Long before the hive fleet proper enters a system, the hive mind may have sent vanguard organisms to prepare the way. These include lictors, chameleonic predators that gather intelligence and pick off key targets, and genestealers, six-limbed nightmares whose claws can pierce ceramite and who carry a genetic infection that creates secret cults within populations. Genestealers slip onto worlds via drifting space hulks or infested cargo ships, then propagate their insidious genestealer cults for generations, infecting hosts and implanting the notion that the Star Children, the Hive Fleet, will come as salvation. By the time the skies darken with spores, these cults commonly rise up, sabotaging defenses and spreading chaos among the defenders. Thus, many a world was already lost from within before the first Tyranid drop pod hit ground. Meanwhile, other subtle bioforms might seed a planet's ecosystem with peculiar spores or creatures that alter the environment, anticipating the needs of the coming swarm. Next is the full invasion. As the Hive Fleet's bioships enter orbit, they unleash millions of mycetic spores, living drop capsules, in a relentless bombardment. These spores rip through the skies, some carrying warrior organisms, others laden with biotoxic payloads. The initial waves often include xenoforming agents, engineered fungi, and microbes that attack native flora and fauna. These organisms might cause plants to grow uncontrollably and then rot into sludge, or make animals hyper-aggressive, all to destabilize the environment and concentrate biomass for easier harvesting. Capillary towers, fast-growing vein-like plants, thrust up from the ground, beginning to pump atmosphere and nutrients toward the waiting bioships. The very air becomes hostile. Drifting spores fill the skies in zones of heavy Tyranid activity, making it dangerous even to breathe. Meanwhile, the combat organisms begin their sweep. Gaunts and other lesser creatures are hurled at population centers in endless waves, herded by larger beasts and flying gargoyles into the killing fields of the defenders. The Tyranids exhibit strategic cunning. Prey populations are corralled and driven, often tricked into retreating along routes that lead them into ambushes or concentrated kill zones prepared by the swarm. Resistance pockets get encircled and destroyed in detail. As defenses falter, the swarm escalates, unleashing its large bioforms to crush fortified strongpoints. Battle titans of chitin and bone, like Hierophant biotitans, stomp across war-torn plains, leveling anything remaining of the defenders' strongholds. It is a scene of total war, with innumerable alien entities coordinated flawlessly, sniper beasts picking off heavy weapons teams, burrower beasts erupting from underground to shatter artillery emplacements, and psychic monstrosities like zoanthropes frying armored columns with warp energies. Every human or Xenos weapon expended, every brave stand, only delays the inevitable by moments. Once organized military resistance is quashed, often within a matter of weeks or even days, the invasion turns into consumption. At this stage, the planet itself seems to die. Tyranid ripper swarms, small voracious creatures, carpet the ground, devouring any and all organic matter, from corpses to crops to bacterial life in the soil. Forests and jungles collapse as specialized Tyranid organisms liquefy and absorb the biomass of every tree and animal. Rivers and lakes are poisoned to kill aquatic life, which is then absorbed by drone organisms. All that biomass is hauled or oozed into reclamation pools, massive digesting pits where everything is reduced to a nutrient gruel. The Hive Fleet's ships descend lower in orbit, extending tentacle-like feeder tubes that latch onto the capillary towers and siphon up the rich bioslurry. You can imagine the horror on the ground, the sky pierced by living towers pumping the very life essence of the world upward as seas bubble away, and even the atmosphere is slowly drunk by the Tyranid ships. In the final phase, assimilation, every last molecule of useful material is extracted. The oceans are boiled off and inhaled, the atmosphere itself sucked into giant bloated sacs on the bioships. Even the planet's crust is often cracked for minerals. Though the Tyranids prefer not to waste energy digging deep, they will take easily accessible metals and minerals to build into future bioweapons. What remains when the Hive Fleet eventually departs is a dead, airless rock scraped clean of life, the ultimate fate the Tyranids bring to all worlds they conquer. It is sobering to note that all this can occur in a matter of weeks. A documented Tyranid attack on one planet showed that within 80 days of first landfall, the world was a barren ball of dust. When belated Imperial relief fleets arrive, they find nothing left but silent cities and gray deserts of ash. Occasionally, in their terrible logic, the Tyranids will leave behind a rear guard on a consumed world, typically clusters of hibernating genestealers buried in deep caves or under rubble. These remain dormant for years or centuries, serving as sentinels. Should some intrepid explorers or colonists attempt to resettle the ruined planet, the rear guard will awaken and eliminate them, or use them to start a new genestealer cult. They may even send a psychic beacon to attract a new hive fleet if sufficient prey gathers again. The hive mind plans long-term. It is patient and methodical in ensuring no resource is left untapped. In the broader sense, the philosophical and existential threat of the Tyranids cannot be overstated. In the grim darkness of the far future, the galaxy has no shortage of horrors. Chaos demons that feast on souls, Necron exterminators who erase existence with cosmic weapons, orc hordes that drown systems in brutality. Yet the Tyranids represent something uniquely apocalyptic. They are life turned into the engine of life's destruction. They do not hate, they do not fear, they do not gloat or scheme. They simply hunger. As one inquisitor described, there is a cancer eating at the Imperium, an unimaginable galactic threat. We have given the horror a name, the Tyranid race. But if it is aware of us at all, it must know us only as prey. In the Tyranids, the most frightening facets of nature are made manifest. The swarm of locusts, the colony of army ants, the great white shark, multiplied to cosmic scale and left unchecked. They are the ultimate predators, for to them all other species are mere cattle for the slaughter. Unlike the forces of chaos, the Tyranids cannot be turned back by faith or contained by some spiritual victory. Unlike the Necrons or Eldar, they cannot be bargained with or understood on any cultural level. Their mind is utterly alien, or perhaps it is better to say they have no minds, only the one vast hive mind. Philosophers have pondered, do the Tyranids have a purpose beyond consumption? Are they fleeing something even worse in the void beyond galaxies? Is there an apex predator elsewhere that scares even the hive mind? Or are they simply following an instinct as fundamental as gravity, to spread, to feed, to grow? The terrifying truth might be that there is no deeper meaning to the Tyranid onslaught. They are a force of nature, or supernature, as impersonal as a plague, but directed by an intelligence as far above human as we are above bacteria. Some have even postulated that the war against the Tyranids is unwinnable in the long term, that the best one can hope is to shepherd the flames of civilization for a while longer before they are inevitably snuffed out by entropy given form in the Great Devourer. And yet, as the Imperium girds itself for new tyrannic wars, hope lives on in defiance of the odds. In the closing years of M41 and the dawn of M42, reports confirmed that the main Tyranid fleet is still out there, beyond the galactic rim, approaching inexorably. The invasions faced so far, Behemoth, Kraken, Leviathan, and countless splinters, are but probing tendrils, the first hungry mouths of a much larger beast. Now a massive new Hive Fleet invasion erupts in Segmentum Pacificus, opening a fresh theater of war on the galaxy's western edge. The Imperium of man stands upon the brink of an abyss, fighting wars on all fronts, but none quite like the war against the Tyranids. For this is not a war for honor or territory or even dominion. It is a war for survival against an organism that embodies universal extinction. In this conflict, every victory is temporary, every loss permanent. The defenders of the galaxy, human, Eldari, Tau, and more, must find a way to hang on, to adapt as the Tyranids do, and to exploit whatever slim weaknesses can be found. In the end, contemplating the Tyranid threat leaves one with a sobering realization. If the galaxy falls to the Great Devourer, there will be no conqueror lording over the ashes, no slave masters or new empires. There will simply be nothing left but a hungering swarm that moves on, seeking the next source of food. The Tyranids will leave behind a silent galaxy picked clean of life's works. Then they will drift to the next galaxy, and the next, until perhaps nothing living remains anywhere. This is the scale on which the hive mind operates. Against such a backdrop, the struggles of mankind and its allies assume a desperate nobility, sparks of defiance against the dying of the light. As long as there are heroes willing to chainsword through a carnifex's skull, or psychers brave enough to face the shadow in the warp, there is some hope that the Great Devourer can be stalled. But make no mistake, the Tyranids are the ultimate threat in this universe of horrors. They are the shadow at the end of time, the devourer of worlds, the final predator that evolution has unleashed. In them, the Imperium faces an enemy that quite literally embodies the death of all hope and life. And yet we fight on, for as the galaxy well knows, only in death does duty end. The fate of every world hangs in the balance each time the Hive Fleets descend. The Great Devourer has been kept at bay by blood and sacrifice thus far, but it is always just one step behind, ready to engulf the stars. In this dark and solemn hour, the defenders of the galaxy steel themselves anew, knowing that against the Tyranids there is no retreat, no surrender. There is only victory or consumption. The drama of that struggle continues, an unending war for the very right to exist under the cold and pitiless gaze of the hive mind. In the face of the Tyranids, one truth resonates above all. If they are not stopped, they will devour everything. The ultimate predator will meet the ultimate resistance, and the future of the galaxy hinges on which will prove the stronger.